Okay, we'll get started.
Yeah,
Eamon, welcome to the show.
thank you.
Yeah, most welcome. Great to have you on. For a bit of background, we met at David Strongman classes at Beyond. Really fun workouts and got to know each other a little bit there. Got to find out a little bit more about your background. But I guess a good place to start would be, yeah, what's brought you up to this point in time today?
Yeah, okay. Well, without going back too far, because I'm sure we might cover that, I was lived in Perth, Western Australia, most of my adult life. Then we'd moved over here to Bali 2 years. Been here almost 2 years now, with me, my wife, and our 4 kids. So they're aged from 5 to 14 years old. And really it was before then. My wife and I were both working for the public service in Australia, nice safe government jobs. I was a social worker with the health department for about 15 years or so, and then it was nothing actually to do with COVID, just coincided with that. Really good timing. We both started working online, kind of quit our jobs, finished up, started our own businesses, and then really just while we're in a bit of a state of flux, just thought, well, look, we know we wanted to live overseas for a while, if not permanently, and kind of just as soon as the businesses were sort of just, possibly not even quite just, but as soon as we were like, all right, we can make the leap, we kind of just really sold everything and spent a little bit of time in Thailand and Vietnam before, and then but Bali was always, we thought, well, look, we'll come here and stay here for a while. So yeah, that was almost 2 years ago now.
Yeah, I think that's super awesome. We've discussed this previously as well. I think a lot of people have this idea in their mind of, right, let's just quit our jobs, let's start our own businesses, let's move abroad. But they're thinking, oh, I've got family, I've got kids, it's a huge risk. So how did that decision come about for you? Was it easy? Did you doubt yourself? What was sort of going on there?
Yeah, look, it definitely wasn't easy, and I'll be honest, it wasn't actually voluntary. So I feel now coming out on the other side of it, a lot more kind of confident, and like I could, feels a bit like I could look back now and say there was a plan, but really to be honest, so I worked, it was mainly like a mental health social worker, so worked for a while in the courts, justice systems, prisons, and then in an inpatient psychiatric hospital, and then about 8 years working in large hospitals, like the kind of big hospitals in Western Australia, kind of managing the more tricky cases there. And, it was, the job kind of takes its toll after a while. So I just became really, quite burnt out, probably started struggling with my own, mental health issues for a while as well. And really, long story short, got to a point where I couldn't actually keep doing the job. So I'd kind of gone back and forth a bit for, a year or so. Tried a few different things just to see if it was any different. But, I actually just couldn't do it. It's hard to describe to anyone else who hasn't worked there. I mean, I definitely really enjoyed the job, particularly the first maybe even like 10 years. But it's like if you're maybe a paramedic or police officer or something, I think those kind of jobs maybe have a bit of a shelf life, I suppose. We're just dealing with that much human misery. And particularly as we had kids, so, I had no kids when I started, and then we had 4 by the end, and really just having any sort of emotional energy left after, a whole day of work doing that was quite tough. So it wasn't voluntary, if that makes sense. Oh, well, I suppose I was like, yes, I'm going to quit, but I didn't feel like been talking about doing something else, but just so caught up in work for so long. But it was more just got to a point where I was like, oh, actually, I can't keep doing this. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's two different areas we can explore that. I think the first one, I just find it really interesting, even though you hadn't really planned anything, it kind of just happened. And it's almost as if that just happening almost pushed you in the direction where I'd assume you're happy to be, right? It's kind of pushed you in
Absolutely,
the direction. Yeah. So that's an interesting point. I feel like sometimes we kind of need life to happen to us to be able to make those steps forward, right? And that's an interesting one. I wanted to touch upon your sort of the work you were doing and your energy levels there. Because especially in those lines of work, I'd imagine you must have to be really good at protecting your energy, right? Because if you're sort of giving your energy away and you're becoming attached to the sort of stories and lives of other people, yeah, it's going to take a toll on you. So was that a thing? Did you sort of take steps to protect your energy and work on that?
Yeah, look, probably not as much as I should have. So definitely, I think if we, the first couple of years in that, it's exciting, really interesting, exciting work. You getting to help people a lot as well, which kind of like drives you in itself. And then there's probably a bit of a sort of consolidation phase where if you have a good kind of mentor or manager or in that line of work, you'll often have call it like professional supervision. So you'll have a supervisor who will sort of debrief and talk through a bit of that stuff and help you manage it. So definitely always try and be mindful of it. But I also found it's kind of hard. It makes sense in theory. You kind of say, oh yes, look, I'll be able to protect myself and close off from it. But you can't really, part of what makes a good social worker, therapist, psychiatrist or anything is that you can connect with the other person and their kind of suffering and what they're going through. And so that kind of connection is where the kind of healing or curative aspect of that relationship comes from. But it's also where you're sort of inevitably, there's no way to connect with someone like that and not use some of your own emotional energy. So it's, like I said, there's probably like the short-term thing, and there's definitely things you can do to sort of manage it short-term. But then, I don't know, I feel like there's a bit of a cumulative thing as well, where I found after, sort of 10 years or so, and also the longer you do it, you become more specialised in working with more kind of complex cases. It's sort of maybe the expectation rises a little bit.
I see, yeah, because as you get more and more involved in that, then your skills are going to get better and better, and then the types of patients you'll be seeing or the types of people are going to have more complex problems. Yeah, I can see that. I wonder for you then, how did that experience develop for you in terms of the work you were doing, the problems that you were helping people with? Did you see like a shift? Because that's quite a long period to be in that field of work, right? So did you see sort of a change in the types of problems as the years developed, or were there the same sort of themes that people were struggling with?
Yeah, look, really the same sort of themes. A lot of it's, I'm not sure how you can disentangle the two, but certainly, all the way across was a lot of drug and alcohol and mental health type stuff. So, in the justice system, you'd see it was often, a lot of people would kind of do something wrong, get caught doing something wrong, partly because they were using drugs, but then the reason they were using drugs was the mental health and often, the upbringing and personal circumstances. So I'm not sure you can separate out the two. And, then the thing that really surprised me so much was going to work in a medical hospital, because I kind of thought, oh, okay, so worked in the justice system, worked in like a secure, like locked mental health ward. And then in the hospital system, there was definitely a little different and maybe not as intense, but even then still a lot of it was drug and alcohol and mental health type stuff still, maybe a different angle. But if I could kind of sum up, probably the main big things would be drugs and alcohol, mental health, and I'll probably call them like relationship. And particularly, I know, you're mainly interested in men and young men's emotional health and personal growth and, relationship type stuff for men as well.
Yeah, I find the whole sort of drugs and alcohol part really, really interesting. I feel as though the message out there it's quite surface level. It's like, oh, this guy's taking drugs and get off the drugs. But it's like, okay, but why do you think they're doing that? And a lot of the time I think it's because they are trying to put something to cover up their wounds, right? And I think this is the part a lot of people miss. And I think that also helps us create sort of more empathy as well, right? And I think that's not only for people who take drugs and alcohol, but I think anybody, if they're projecting something onto other people, then that's coming from a place where, when they were younger, they were, they experienced some certain events, perhaps they didn't feel loved enough. I think it all comes down to love, really. I just think they just didn't experience the type of love that they expected at the time. I wonder if, in your case, that's what happened most of the time. But then, did you find that the majority of people actually weren't aware that they were covering up these wounds? Do you think they were kind of just living in sort of autopilot in a way?
Yeah, and I think it becomes a bit of a cycle. So it might kind of start that way. And I think you're absolutely right in terms of the lack of love and nurturing. Oftentimes what lots of people most people actually use drugs and alcohol without having problems with addiction. Actually, it's probably the first thing to note. I don't think they're bad. I don't drink myself anymore or anything, but I know lots of people, most people in the world can use even illegal drugs and alcohol without any problems. But then there are these people where I think just that feeling you get from the drugs and alcohol, they almost like resemble that kind of nurturing, like you said, that you maybe didn't get. It's such a comforting feeling, and I think it feels different for people who are susceptible to addictions, because maybe you haven't had that kind of nurturing and comfort, and you don't know how to kind of create it in yourself either. And then, the problem comes where you do it once, you're like, oh, wow, that was nice. It kind of worked well. But then once you've been doing it for, 1 year, 2 years, a few years straight, you've got this problem where anytime you try not to drink or use drugs, you feel even worse. It's just this like unbearable kind of pain. What started as like maybe just a general disease sort of feeling is then just the completely unbearable pain that you need to numb.
But then, I suppose then what that will then in turn do, if you do sort of abstain, is bring the stuff to the surface, and then that's where I think your role would be really super important, right? 'Cause then it's like, okay, cool, right, we're not numbing this stuff anymore. Let's get down to it and let's unravel, why you feel this way. And like you said, I think a lot of the time when people take these substances, it's because they feel a certain way I don't think they can access when sober, right? In their just normal everyday life, which is a really big shame, because I do think everybody, as you'd probably agree, everybody can create that sense of joy for life, right? They just need sort of the right sort of steps to get there. So in your case, was it, again, just talking with them and thinking, okay, right, these things are at the surface, and then uncovering, right, the deeper layers behind that? And was that process different for everybody? Because I feel as though some people can recover from their wounds or understand them at a faster rate than other people. Did you find that as well?
Yeah. And look, I think for most people working in drug and alcohol or mental health type fields, there's like, you might think people come in somewhat calm, and they think, oh, look, I've been struggling with anxiety or depression, or I know I've been drinking too much, I need help, and you work through it in a calm, rational manner. That's almost never the way it happens. It's oh, my wife's going to leave me, or I got arrested, or, I went on a 1-week bender and now I'm locked up in a psych hospital sort of thing. And so it's those kind of crisis points usually where you would see people where something's happened, that they've gone along, because drugs and alcohol work for a while. Sometimes it's even, people even function better to some degree for a short period of time, but usually inevitably the wheels fall off, something big goes wrong. And then that's really what those public health institutions that I worked for are there for. It's this safety net, which, we're very lucky to have in Australia and the UK, where, when you do really end up in a tough spot like that, they're not perfect, but there are public health services where someone can kind of come in, or a team of people, and try and sort of come up with a bit of a plan. And, usually at that stage, if someone's, drinking every day or taking drugs and everything's going well, they're not going to be all that inclined to change. Whereas if your life's just fallen apart, that's a really good time to kind of say, hey, have you thought about, what about we try something different, or try this?
Yeah, this is something we've actually talked about on the podcast quite a lot recently.
Okay.
Do you think a lot of people actually need to reach that breaking point? I think before then, people are sort of in denial. I think they numb themselves with, it could be alcohol, it could be even cigarettes, whatever it may be. And a lot of the time, I think you almost sort of believe your own story, that everything's fine. And I think you've got so many layers to the ego there.
Yeah.
So is it a case of, people just need to be at that breaking point, right? They need to be at that point where, okay, you know what, I have to do something. Like, they need the ego to be almost broken in a way.
I mean, it's an interesting question, and I've thought I'd almost bring that back to like personal growth in general, because I think that idea, I think definitely a lot of change, and even for myself, like talking about changing work, like best thing I've ever done, but it only came when I had no other option. But there was kind of just, even though I knew for years, I was like, you need to do something else, and you try and tinker around the edges and build a bit of momentum up and stop. Yeah, I don't know if it I think most commonly that's how it happens. I think it's just human nature that we kind of we'll go to great lengths to maintain status quo, or like homeostasis. We'll, for whatever reason, I think our kind of psyche, subconscious, whatever, likes to maintain the status quo even when we know it's not healthy, because that seems safer, it's more comfortable. And so it's often just only when things just really fall apart and you're like, okay, there's always an option, plenty of people keep going, but only when it seems like, really the pain of continuing has become so great that, change seems like a more viable option. But I really think, it's something I've thought about a lot, that if, for all of us anyway, if you could kind of cultivate that self, that insight, and it happens in lots of different areas. You've got maybe like work, relationships, health, and the like. If you can somehow get that self insight to kind of go, okay, look, this isn't all that healthy, what I'm doing, whatever this pattern is, or just I don't want to keep doing this. I'd rather it be different, and then you can try and change it before things fall apart. Yeah.
Like you've alluded to there, I do think that is tricky for a lot of people. A lot of people, I think, don't want to look inside. They don't want to sort of face the reality of how things are going right. And I think, relationships you mentioned there, I think that's a big one for a lot of men. I think when relationships don't quite work out the way they want to, I think you have two choices. You can either sort of attach blame to, I think, the partner and what they may have done. But I think it takes more sort of strength to go, okay, right, what could I have done better in this situation? And I wonder if that's a big part of the work you did, was sort of taking responsibility for not only your actions but your emotions as well. Yeah.
I think just going, I think once you've made it's kind of making that decision to change. So I think it's okay if it's coerced and there's some external pressure. I think that's usually how change will happen. And I think it's probably trying to view that when things kind of fall apart and get to an untenable situation. Even the relationships are a good example. If things might be like awful, right? You might get to a position where you just think, I don't know. You might not be thinking, I don't know how to salvage this, but you're just like, whoa, this is like just the worst our relationships ever been. If you can kind of look at that objectively and see a path for, use that rather than kind of go, okay, well, we're just going to give up on it, or we'll just keep doing the same thing and hope something goes better. If you can kind of use that as a turning point to go, okay, well, how could we actually use this to grow and bring something positive? I think, you've, like you said, I'm sure you've had lots of good examples on the podcast of some amazing things happen from those like rock bottom moments where you're just like, I really don't know what to do here. And often, you end up, I think a lot of us can relate, you end up doing things you just didn't think were possible. Like I know sometimes I think, on an average day I might be a bit kind of lacking in energy, or like, why can't I kind of focus or do this? And you think, geez, actually it doesn't feel that great in the moment, but you can actually achieve a lot of stuff when you're really at that point and you've made a decision to change and do something, and you're like, I need to do something big. You can achieve some pretty amazing things from that rock bottom point.
Oh, 100%. And I think it's reframing those challenging moments that comes up on the podcast a lot, right? I think a lot of the time we lament or we resist the depths of human emotion. Whereas I believe, right, when you have taken that hit to your ego and you are at rock bottom, I think that's a fantastic place to be in. When you've got nothing to lose, you can start building stronger foundations. Whereas before you could argue, right, as much as you want to sort of hold on to that old identity, I think there's a reason why you're at the place you're at now. It's because that probably wasn't serving you before. And now you've got a chance to really rebuild. And would you say at that stage then it's, okay, just right, acknowledgement that you're at that place? And then do you think also sort of having a support network is a big thing?
Yeah.
Especially in the field you were at, I can imagine these guys didn't have much of a support network at all.
No,
right?
no. So I think definitely having, and it helps to have an external person to talk to. I mean, I did the same, right? I was seeing a clinical psychologist towards the end, and after I kind of quit my job, because I was like, I got a reasonable idea of what I want to do, but I can't actually figure it out myself, because the thing is that being stuck in that despair point and not having any idea to do, like often nothing good comes from that, but it's being able to kind of like reframe it and see another possibility. And I think sometimes you can't do that yourself. Like maybe to give an example, it sounds so simple now, but it changed my life. The psychologist I was seeing, we were talking about work, and that was all I'd done, being a social worker. And so I was kind of just like, thought that was sort of the only way to work, and certainly the only work that I could do was sort of like helping people. And he was like, oh, you know what, Eamon, it's totally fine to just choose a job just for money and free. I'd already started doing a bit of writing at this point, and I was like talking to him, I was like, I actually think I can probably really make a go of this. And then, because I kept thinking my other ideas were all like, how could I do something really safe to just kind of like go into management, or something to do with healthcare and what I'd already done. I was like, how can I just turn it just a little bit so that, it'll be okay and I don't really have to change. And then I was talking about the writing, and I was like, oh, I don't know. And he was like, it's totally fine. Like, it's like, you don't need to help people. It's like most people don't like spend their whole lives trying to help people with their mental health issues or whatever. You can just choose a job based on lifestyle, money, and what it gives you. You don't have to even particularly enjoy the work or find it meaningful. It's like, that's totally fine. And I was like, whoa, I just never really considered that. And I suppose his point was that's actually a different kind of meaning, that he's like, you can kind of get meaning from work in a different way. It doesn't have to be that this is something really profound. It can be that, for me, it was like, well, look, this lets me, writing, I do enjoy writing, so that definitely helps. But I was like, I can spend, work from home, spend heaps more time with my kids, and then we could travel. So that was super meaningful, even when I'm writing about medical software or something, boring like that, or supplements or something.
Okay. Yeah, I really like that because I guess my instinct there was, yeah, that's really interesting. I feel as though, yeah, even in your case, like you said, at first it's okay, well, it doesn't have any meaning, but it does because in a way, by you doing that, it kind of means that you can sort of give back to the world almost. You can give back to your kids, and also you have been sort of giving to people your whole life as well, right?
Yeah.
So there's that. But I love that you've sort of had that sort of different perspective as well. A lot of people think they have to do things a certain way, and that's why I think having somebody else, whether it's a psychologist, a coach, or even just a trusted friend, to sort of look at you and talk with you and point out your blind spots a bit. I think that's super important. And yeah, I love that you've sort of gone into that. I think it'd be really interesting to sort of hear about that journey because yeah, no doubt it wasn't easy, right?
Yeah.
Have there been points where you've gone, oh fuck, is this even going to work out? And how was that process?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, so probably I was fortunate in that I'd worked for the government for 15 years straight, so I had a bit of cushion when I quit. I had long service leave, annual leave, and all that. So I was like, okay, so I got a bit of a runway. Of a good, I think it was 6-9 months, and I was like, sounds like a long time, but it's not real, to kind of redo a whole career, and with, a lot of people depending on me financially, there was still a bit of a rush. And so it was always that split between, okay, well, it makes more sense to try and do something safe. But then I was like, you know what, I don't mind Perth, Australia, it's fine, but I'd live there forever, and just really wanted to do something a little different in terms of just my life looking different from just going to an office or a hospital every day, and also just doing something different, a little more stimulating, and being able to travel as well. So it was, kind of like, well, we just hadn't traveled much because we had kids, just working. It's not, just wasn't really on the cards. So I picked up a few, while I was trying to think of the safe things I could do, picked up a few writing jobs. I just got on Upwork. It's just a freelancing platform, kind of made a profile, was like, okay, so as a health professional I can write sort of like medical and healthcare, mental health type articles. So picked up a couple of jobs with that, not charging very much at all to begin with, and then those went well, and I was like, well, okay. It was a lot of learning, like I'd done a lot of writing in my work, like writing reports and things like that, but marketing type stuff was quite different. And so I'm going to kind of make it all seem like it was way faster and easier than it was, but bear in mind this was five years ago now, so it probably took 2 years to build it up close to where I could kind of support my family, where it was like even close to what I was earning before. And that looked like I think my first year on Upwork, people often say like, oh, doesn't work anymore, you can't get jobs or whatever or make any money off it. But I think, talking about digging deep in terms of when your back's against the wall, I think I applied for had a look one day, and was 1,000 jobs, like almost 1,000, like 990 something within 12 months. Just like every day I'd just wake up and go, okay, because I'd had a bit of interest and got my first few jobs, but then there was a big gap between actually earning an income, and every single day, like 7 days a week, was just like, all right, this is what, spending hours applying for jobs, then I'd do my work, and then just kind of rinse and repeat.
I love that for many reasons. I think first of all, the fact that you've sort of built that business based off of Fiverr.
Yeah.
Actually, we had another guest on, Alex Bull, and yeah, very similar story actually,
okay.
Where he just thought he heard a podcast about the money or someone earning a living on Fiverr and making a success out of it, and that's what prompted him to then build his business and then build the life that he has now, living remotely, Yeah, that's super inspiring. I think a reminder for everyone listening as well. You can create whatever you want to create. You just gotta, I think, but at the same time, you got to be willing to put in the hard work as well, right? And like you said, it took you 2 years to be earning the same amount of money, but what a great payoff, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You've had the opportunity now to, yeah, move to a country that you love and just try stuff out. And yeah, I absolutely love that for, again, many reasons. I think that's super awesome. And again, it reiterates the message of, it's the small actions every single day that compound over a longer period of time. You've got to be willing to sort of put in the hard work as well. So that's really cool. Obviously now I think the motivator for you is your kids. I'm intrigued to learn, back when you first got into your previous role, what was your sort of motivation for getting into that line of work? Do you think there were links there between sort of your upbringing and, yeah, how did that all come about?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I didn't think about it a whole lot, to be honest. Like, I kind of finished, both my parents had gone to university, so it was sort of like expected that I would finish high school, and then kind of applied. I was just going to do like a straight arts degree, enjoy social studies, English and all that kind of stuff. Always enjoyed writing. And then I kind of applied, got in. I was like, I'm going to defer for a year, and just started working full time. And after a couple of months of that, I was like, this is, I don't know if I want to do just this, working for like $7 an hour in a fruit and veg warehouse. So I was like, okay, reverse that. And I'll go to uni. And so just, kept working just, regular jobs while doing uni. And just someone... It was kind of almost a random thing. I was going to do a straight arts degree, and someone was like, well, look, you know what? You can just add 1 year on and do social work. You can still kind of choose all your similar things you want to do, except then you'll have something really tangible at the end where you're like, okay, your job prospects are probably a bit better. And it just sort of happened that way, and kind of built the interest while I was doing it. So.
Yeah, and did you find yourself over time getting more and more invested into it? Did it sort of unlock sort of a new train of thought for you? Did it start getting you thinking about your own life as well, perhaps?
Yeah. No, it did. Trying to think of how... I mean, probably most of it was just I've just always been interested and fascinated in like psychology and human behavior and the like. Probably I'd say maybe like social justice type issues. So it kind of blended all that kind of stuff that I just found it was just really interesting. Really, like, as much as I was like, by the end of it, I was ready to leave hospitals, and not meaning it from a kind of voyeuristic type of point of view in terms of looking in at people's misery, but hospitals, and so they're exciting places, really interesting work, the things you come across. Like I travelled a bit with the justice system, like working through the Pilbara, like the Aboriginal communities, like worked for a few months travelling around to the court, doing the court circuit and stuff there. So it was just probably more just like a fascinating way to sort of learn and view just humanity, learn about psychology, see it in action, not like textbook type stuff, and just be exposed, and it did make me very grateful for what I had myself. Like, I think it's easy to sort of sometimes, and I find myself doing this a lot more now that I'm not in that line of work. You'll get complaining or, resentful about something, but when, I'm working with someone who's 40 and they've got cancer in the hospital or something, or someone who, is in their 20s in prison, but they're a foster kid or something, it was a lot easier to have gratitude for my own, things then.
That's why I find men's circles really powerful, and I highly recommend everyone goes to them. because at the end of the day, we all want to be seen and listened to and understood, right? And there's something really profound and almost like a selfish way, I think. When you listen to other people's stories, you're like, oh, or what's going on in their week, you're like, oh, wow, okay, suddenly my problems
Yeah, it's not so bad.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the biggest illusion we grow up with, especially your generation, I imagine. Like, no one really talks about their shit, right? So I imagine a lot of the time, I mean, even I'd be interested to hear about your experience growing up, in the sense that I think back then, no one really, it's only now really where, at least in some parts of the world, where men are starting to actually embrace that life's not great. So what was that like for you? Was it back then, was it just not spoken about at all, or were they starting to open up a bit?
Not really. And even once because I got into that work quite young, just like, I think, how old was I? I would have only been 21 or 22 when I started doing it. I kind of shudder looking back at it, thinking like, it was so green and fresh in life. But they're just not really. And like I do a lot of my copywriting work now is with business to business, what we call it, B2B marketing. It's like, so it'll be maybe like software products and stuff that are for healthcare professionals. And so the marketing is kind of writing to them. And, it's a huge problem all around the whole world now, is like health worker burnout just basically really became more noticed and broadcast with COVID, just how tough that was for people working in hospitals then. But it's a huge problem, and I was talking to a client from the US about it just a couple of days ago, and so in the marketing, a lot of the products I work on are like AI type software that'll write the notes because that's one of the things, you even as a social worker, you think, oh, I'm getting into this to help people, but like every hour you spend helping people, you're spending an hour or so writing notes, and just this crazy amounts of documentation. And so, AI does a reasonable job of cutting that down now, and one of the big causes of burnout is that big, the documentation burden. But I was saying to this guy, as a psychiatrist, he was asking, do I believe in, am I passionate about health worker burnout and stuff like that? And I was like, well, yeah, but at the time, I mean, that was essentially why I left. But I was like, I had just had I was just flailing for years, but so were a lot of other people. And it just wasn't really, it's like, oh, go see the employee assistance counselor or something, and they'd be like, oh, do you want to take a day off here or there? Or, have you tried this the self-care type stuff does work. But like you said, we just, even in that, like a professional mental health setting, we didn't really talk about it much. It was more just sort of like, well, just, stiff upper lip, kind of just, we're all busy, we all got a job to do, just get in there and sort of do it.
Yeah, I just really question that. I feel like that's still sort of the attitude, really. I feel as though, especially in a corporate setting, if someone were to...
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, and, whether the company says it or not, the reality is if you told someone you were burnt out or whatever, are they going to take that seriously? And, would they start questioning you, perhaps, and start questioning your abilities? And I really empathise with that a lot. I think a lot of people... Yeah, and I can imagine the healthcare system as well. I can totally get why people would feel that way, and how difficult it would be, I think, to manage all that. So you would just continue to work despite, just keep on going, or what?
Yeah, really. And look, I would expect it's as bad as my father was a lawyer, and you'd see, I think in that, certainly whether you're corporate, he was a criminal defense lawyer, but I'm sure it's just the same in corporate law, just, another profession that's just kind of rough. They kind of joke about how high a proportion of them were alcoholics, like it's just, just all like drinking a lot, working heaps on like your third marriage and whatever. So I think it's a problem everywhere. And, for me, the solution was changing, and I'd kind of try, and it's kind of hard, because if someone came to me and asked now, like let's say you were working in healthcare or whatever, and I think it would apply anywhere in corporate settings as well. I don't know if it's the stage of life thing or what else you've got going on, but I do kind of feel that there's probably a bit of a progression where a lot of these jobs are good for the first, let's say through your 20s and 30s and whatever, but I'm not sure we're made to just work, like grind away in an office forever. Like I work more now than I did before, like more hours, but I can do it from home, like I said, spend time with my kids, take the dogs for a walk, come do a podcast. I can kind of, if I want to work till 9 p.m, start at 12 and work till 9, I can.
I find, this is an interesting one to open up, because I share a similar mindset. I think there's so much more to life than going into corporates and working your ass off just so you can afford to pay rent and then have a great fun weekend or whatever. I think there's so much more to that. But then to the other sides, the pushback I get is, okay, but then if everyone did that, then who'd be working, right?
Yeah. And I realize I'm kind of saying it from coming from a privileged position. In terms of really the reason I was able to pivot, what's reasonably fast, I suppose, considering, even though it took a couple of years into a completely different career, was because I used that skill set I had. So already, like I had that strong background in healthcare, and all the writing and marketing work I do now is still really, I've kind of leaned on that and mainly work with health and medical businesses. So I think you're 100% right. I don't know what the solution is to it. It's interesting because the old, social worker Eamon would have been kind of more focused on how that's kind of unfair and whatever. And I think there's an element in that not everyone has the capacity in terms of not everyone had an initial skill or might have had a nice job or financial cushion to be able to pursue something else. But then in the other breath, if you're in that position, like if you're in a corporate job or whatever and you've done something for ages and you just don't like it and you're not happy, and I think the problem is a lot of us are in that kind of, mid-30s to 40s thing, and you're like, I either just keep doing this, and you see your colleagues who are, the generation kind of before you, they're kind of like getting ready to retire. And for me, I was just like, I just do not, I know I don't want to do that. And I mean, you either do it or you don't. I think the thing is, I tried for ages thinking like the hospital system was going to change or the government would change, and they should fix things. Same as big corporations, I'm sure, should make their jobs more, prioritize employee mental health and all that more. But reality is, you'll probably wait the rest of your career for that to change. And
yeah, this is a great point, actually. I think we can direct our energy and anger or whatever it may be towards other people or corporations or the government, but ultimately that's giving the power and control to them, and they're not going to change your life, we are. So I really do think, if you notice, like you said, you had your 30s, 40s, whatever age really, and you think, oh, you know what, I actually don't want this for the rest of my life. I think it's totally fine to just go, I think it's actually a necessity to go, you know what, this doesn't serve me, I'm just going to try something completely new. And I think you're a great example of, you can do something completely new at whatever age, right? And I think that's a big illusion in society, right? That you have to stick to one job and you have to, it's a load of bullshit, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And look, a lot of it is some of the, maybe a conditioning and programming. Like a few people have asked me, how did I learn copywriting? And I'm not lying when I said I just Googled it pretty much. Like I think I was reading a lot of personal development blogs and somehow stumbled across one, the typical cliched, like, work from the beach in Mexico earning 6 figures, like writing on your laptop. And so I bought just a cheap, like I remember the first course was $50. It was just like learning how to blog. And, they sold that initially with that kind of 6-figure life working from the beach. But then I noticed if you actually listen And not everyone will have this integrity who's selling online courses, but when you actually listen to the content and looked at it, they're like, no, you know, if you want to make that much money, you do really have to work hard. Like, it's not just going to be handed to you. And, you know, since then I've done, you know, haven't spent nothing compared to a university degree, but I've done some more online courses and still doing them just to continually brush up my skills. And, you know, at least for me, that kind of stuff was always, you know, it was always kind of rubbish and poo-pooed. Well, that's what influencers do and all that kind of stuff. They're all grifters. There are a lot, you know, I think you should be careful who you buy copywriting courses. I don't know about other things off. There's a lot of people who aren't really, who you wouldn't get much value from, but there's a lot of very legitimate courses that for not much money you can do. And, you know, I'd seen, you know, a lot of my friends would go and do another they think, oh, I want to do something else, so I'm a physiotherapist, and they're like, well, I have to go and do an MBA or do a nursing degree or a medicine degree or something to do something different. And I mean, you can if you want, but there's a whole lot of other options.
Yeah, that's a great point. I had my friend Ash on the show, and he talks about how, yeah, you can go for this sort of, like you said, the university degree, but I think the issue there is that it can be quite broad. Whereas if you choose like a specialization early on, then yeah, you don't need to go through sort of a whole sort of 3-year thing. You can just go, right, okay, let's find specialized experts here or people who are very knowledgeable in that field and go down that route. And these are just the types of conversations I think are really important to have. Just exposure to different points of view, right? That, okay, your way about doing things isn't the only way. Similar to what happened in your story, when this chap was like, you know, it doesn't have to be, you know, this doesn't have to be something you're passionate about and love. I think that goes for all stages of life. I think everyone wants to find their calling or their purpose, and while I do think that is an important aspect to life, I also think if you haven't found that yet, that's also cool. I think just try different shit out, and you know, you didn't even know from the sounds of it what you wanted to do, but you kind of ended up in that field, and you ended up experiencing so much, right? And you had all these different experiences and insights, and you kind of found something that you were very interested in and passionate about for a while, right? What was the biggest thing that you learned sort of mental health wise? What were the sort of biggest breakthroughs that you experienced working with people?
Yeah, probably there would be a couple, and this is probably one personal as much as professional. Like, if drugs and alcohol aren't kind of like healthy or compatible with a healthy you, just stop. Like, it's probably, you know, better, like, just some people can't really drink or use drugs or whatever in moderation. And I think, particularly in Australia, it's just not, you know, I'm odd. I don't drink. It's just, yeah, I'm a weirdo, right? Like, it's, it's a very, I think maybe some more people, maybe it's a little more common now, but I think that would be the number one. Just like, if, you know, if it's okay, there are plenty of people. It's hard for young men to see, you know, when you're in your 20s and someone says, like, I'd say to people in the psych hospital, like, you can't smoke weed anymore. Every time you do, you have a psychotic episode. And I'm like, you just can't. Or you can, but you'll keep, it'll get worse, yeah.
Well, I think you've touched upon a great point there. I don't think a lot of people realise that they have an alcohol problem. I think a lot of the time people are a bit delusional. They think that it's normal to work during the week and then have a big bender on the weekend and have like 6-7 pints and then shots and then feel like shit for another week. I think that's what the majority of society does, and I don't think we should. I think when has following the crowd ever got you anywhere? And this is what I mean, seeing beyond the illusion. I think, you'll look at all these people, right, they're drinking, they might seem like they're having fun, but I think that's all an illusion. It's like, okay, why they actually feel the need to drink that much every single weekend? Like, what reality are they escaping, right? And I really think we can create that sense of joy within us right now. And if you want to drink to enhance your already sort of fruitful life experience, and do what you want, right? Have a glass of wine do whatever works for you. But I think if you're consistently going out and drinking a shit ton every weekend, then why do you feel the need to do that? And I feel like the baseline response would be, because it's fun.
Yeah.
Okay, why can't you have fun without alcohol? You know what I mean? And I remember, so many times now where I think people were, astounded that I was dancing to music sober.
Yeah. Like how can you do that? Like,
and it's I really do believe that, and I think a lot of people get sort of defensive about alcohol, but I think it's a real thing. You know, it's like you wouldn't get someone asking you, okay, hang on a sec, why would you like some cocaine? And you say no. He's like, well, hang on, what? Why not? Why not? And then you're like, well, because it's pretty obvious, right? And I think why people have that same response to alcohol, like why would you put poison in your body? And when I went sober for a year, and the difference in my mental clarity, waking up every day, feeling like a baby, it's a great feeling, and I think you need to experience that or sobriety for, I think, at least 6 months to really to really get that. And I think if you haven't done that, then
and if you've never done it, because for me it was, I don't know about the UK, but in Australia you normally start quite young, like 15, 16, you're drinking most weekends, or and it was, it wasn't until how long, probably close to my 30s, that I kind of had like an extended period sober, like was just like, well, I'm not going to drink for a couple of months.
And I think that can apply to all different walks of life. I think not just alcohol, but all of the stuff that you get pleasure from. When was the last time you went without it, right? And that can go, that's not just alcohol, that could be any type of drugs, it could be perhaps even cigarettes, but it could be some other stuff as well. It could even be sex as well. When was the last time you went without sex for an extended period? I think all these different types of things, it's like, okay, right, are we actually relying on this to an extent? And I think just we've got so used to being comfortable, I think, and just comfortable, and okay, every time there's a sense of discomfort, okay, let's just scroll on social media, and we get these cheap fixes, or I think just being honest with ourselves can help as well.
Yeah. And like all of us know deep down, like it's fine for plenty of people. Like I said, most people, I think, can drink or even use drugs occasionally without having any problems. It might change throughout your life, but there's a reasonable portion of us who can't, or just for whatever reason it's a net negative to your life, and whether it is. It's much easier said than done, and it took me kind of years to kind of consistently stay sober and just kind of make that decision, just that, well, life's better without it. Like, not like stopping for 6 months and then just have one or two here and there, and like just to kind of consistently go, okay, well, just for me now, it doesn't have to be forever either, but for now, life's better without it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point as well. I feel like a lot of the time this is a process, right? I don't think you'll suddenly go from, because at least in my case, I would be going out sort of every weekend, and university's a fun time for that. Okay? It is fun at the time.
Love that.
It's an excuse to just get on it every weekend. But I think, and eventually you'll go through periods of, okay, right, perhaps for some people it's just they'll do dry January or sober October, and maybe that's something, and then you might fall back into old patterns. I think that's actually quite normal, I think, for a lot of people. So what I would say to people is, don't be disheartened if you sort of fall back into old patterns. I think a lot of the time it's just a reminder, okay, cool, like that's interesting, how does this make me feel? And I think the universe will continue to teach you the same lessons until you sort of get the idea, right?
Exactly,
And it comes up on this podcast a lot, it's
most of us need it. It needs to happen a lot. You need to be smacked inside the head with it 5 times before you even realise.
100%. I think just keeping an eye open for the patterns, right? Whether it's in your relationships, whether it's in everyday life, whether it's with people, whether it's with alcohol and feeling a certain way. I think it takes a while for it to really kick in and be sort of aware of all these patterns, right? And super, super important. We've covered a lot of ground, actually. This has flown by.
Yeah.
But what we'll do, we'll jump into sort of the closing traditions on the podcast.
Yeah.
And yeah, for season 2, we've been doing 3 questions.
Okay.
The first 2 are consistent, and then the third one is asked by a member of our Growth Voice community on Instagram. The first question is a song suggestion.
A song suggestion. I like 90s hip hop, so I got no internet, but King Von, something about a story. You'll be able to find it anyway if you look on Spotify. Nothing kind of positive or growth or role model or anything, but yeah, I like hip hop still.
Okay, wicked. Yeah, I'll give it a listen. I'll put it in the description as well
Yeah,
after.
yeah.
Second one is a book suggestion.
Book suggestion. I think for any entrepreneur, or really anything, even in a career or job, just to know how to market yourself, would be On Advertising by Robert Ogilvy. It's one of the probably one of the most famous advertising men, and just a fascinating book in terms of just understanding marketing. I'll add as a second one, if you wanted something maybe a little more contemporary, Seth Godin, This Is Marketing. Seth Godin's probably like this generation, whereas Ogilvy is the previous one, but it's still a classic. I think both of those just, if you're going to aiming to do anything for yourself, it'll just help you clarify. They're as much about coming up with your mission and your message and everything as it is about marketing.
Okay, wicked. Yeah, these are the stuff which is just super important, not only for our own development, but I think the way that we see the world and how messages are projected onto us, and seeing beyond the sort of first view of things, I suppose. So really cool. I'll be checking those out. Third question, let's have a look. Okay, this question comes in from Michael Gray, who says, what was the best day of your life?
So I can't say any of my kids because I've got 4, because I can't choose one, but that was nice when they were born. But look, the best day, so far, I think, and, recent memory was when we had, so we'd lived in the same house and really similar area for, most of my adult life in Perth, Western Australia. And we had just been packing up our stuff. So I knew before we moved, we were like, if the smart thing maybe would have been to put all our stuff in storage, had a whole house, beds, everything. And we were like, no, you know what, we're going to sell what we can sell. And we did kind of 3 runs of, just filling up a skip bin, emptying it over and over. And so over the period of about a week, we kind of got rid of everything. We're renting this big 4-bedroom house, and it just slowly got emptier and emptier until it was just mattresses on the floor. And we just had, my wife's got it all, good pictures of it and all documented on Instagram. We just had this room with all our suitcases kind of there. And so we kind of filled them up, and just then, that morning we kind of woke up and we went to Thailand first. Had to wait a while because we kind of got a long-term visa for Bali, but had to wait a little while. And probably the best day was just, packing up all those suitcases, getting in the taxi, jumping on the plane, and then just scary as anything, but kind of just going, okay, there's everything we had and knew is gone. All that we've got is just in these suitcases, and we all just kind of head off to Phuket.
Wow, I've got goosebumps thinking.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so awesome. And it's amazing because the best moment was when you were in the most fear. I think there's something so freeing about that.
Yeah, it was terrifying, and I've thought since, I'm glad, because, relocating is hard. You meet a lot of people in Bali who've been here 6, 12 months. I'm not saying we're any better being here 2 years, but I've just noticed a lot of, most people I meet have only been here for a little while, and I think it's because we would have, if we had kept our house, if we had kind of kept the lease and or put our stuff in storage, we would have gone back after 6, 9 months, because we were just there's times you're just I don't know how to make this work. Airbnbs are, crazy expensive. Like, I don't even know how we're going to be able to afford it. You used to just the houses are a whole lot different. Standard of living's kind of quite different, and I'm sure we would have gone back. But then, once it ticked on, once we got past that 6-month mark or so, loved it and wouldn't change it for anything, and it's really good. But I think it's just that time, and this is probably, if there's a kind of theme for, my kind of probably philosophy on life, and you were talking about, approaches to mental health. I think it's thinking about sometimes those safety nets you've got and the things that you keep you safe are actually what's also keeping you stuck. That you can't have the safety and the change.
Yeah, I love that, wholeheartedly agree. I think fortune favours the brave, right? And I think we've got to be 100% committed to something. I think a lot of the time, a lot of the pain and overthinking and all the other stuff that life brings that we don't associate with positive stuff is when we are kind of 70-80% into a decision and we've still got that 20%, oh, should I have done this, should I have done that? I think pick something and just fucking go for it. I absolutely love that message. I think Eamon, you've been such an inspiration. I think it's been super cool hearing about your own journey, and no doubt people will be listening to this, and I actually think you could very well motivate somebody to pack it all up and make that change that they've been desiring to do their whole life. Where can people get in touch with you if they're interested in the work that you're doing or just want to connect?
Yeah, so probably LinkedIn is the best. Not very active on Instagram or social media other than that, but LinkedIn, you can find me. That's got a link to my website for any copywriting stuff, or people can find me on Upwork as well. But if you want to get in touch, just send me a message on LinkedIn. Happy to, I don't kind of produce my own content or anything yet. If I did, it would be on, the things I'm most passionate about are probably helping men kind of find a way to progress on to sort of find something more meaningful in terms of work. I think it's a big part of life as well. So happy for anyone to contact me and ask any questions as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'll put all that in the description as well. But thanks so much for coming on, mate. Appreciate it.
No worries, Harrison. My pleasure.
Pleasure.